Oh, I got something going on with my hair. What is that?
You're a very handsome boy. Just go with it.
Okay. Sorry. I'm very self-conscious now. We have like a costume designer. She's staring right at me.
She's not a hair and makeup lady.
Care about your hair. But your shirt is trash.
Yeah. All right.
No, it's not.
What is that, polyester?
Well, I would say like that. Because natural fibers only.
I'm wearing,
anyway, sorry, polyester itches.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm wearing black because it's slimming. All right.
Okay.
The following podcast may contain adult language and an abundance of salt. So get ready, nerds, because we're having an interview with the costume designer from SEE, Natalie Bronfman. Welcome, everybody, to a special episode of the Salty Nerd Podcast. Today, we are getting the honor of talking with the costume designer from the Apple TV show SEE, Natalie Bronfman. And I'm joined, as always, by my fantastic panel of nerds, minus one. Matt Vader is not here, but Jude is, and this is going to be definitely her show today. You are so stoked.
I'm very excited.
Welcome
I've been
to the show.
excited for weeks.
Yeah.
Ever since we knew that this was going to happen. I've been just adding to my questions every day.
And the man behind the curtain, Matthew Kadish. Welcome, sir.
I'm actually very excited for Jude because when we're watching SEE, like she just sits there and she's like, "Oh, I like that coat. Ooh, look at those shoes." It's like, "Can I get those jingle bells?" You know, like she's just obsessed with what blind people wear. So now that we actually get a chance to get all of our questions answered about this this wonderful world of SEE, she's been so happy lately.
Very
That's made my
excited.
life much easier.
And the guest of honor, Natalie, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming. We really are. We are blown away by the generosity of the cast and crew behind this show that we love so much. You guys have all been really stand-up people, chatting with us on Instagram and agreeing to do these interviews. We just had one with Christian Camargo. We've got a couple more lined up later on this month. So we are just ecstatic that you guys love our show so much.
Yeah.
Or tolerate our show. So
Yeah.
Yeah, love is a bit of a
No,
strong
it's great.
word.
It's great. It's great. I love watching it.
That's awesome. So getting right into it, my first question, it has a lot to do with the collaboration with you and the director and writer. So what kind of collaboration do you guys have with the directors and writers and producers to ensure that their vision for the characters comes across on screen? What kind of work do you guys do together?
Typically, we have very big meetings at the very beginning with all of the heads of department at a large table. Well, before COVID, it was large table. Now it's Zoom meetings. And we sort of just flesh out what their vision is, sort of in a grand scheme of things. And then all the different heads of departments go away, work on their presentation, and then we each have our presentation. Then for me, after I do the presentation and we agree upon what it should be, I usually am left to fine tune it. And then when I have my first fitting with the actors, I like to just actually meet them, really more so than anything, and measure them, and then talk to them about how they're layering their characters and what they would want to see possibly in their clothing that they could use while they're acting. So it's a big collaboration, like from top to bottom.
Nice.
Yeah, I think that I just think it's really cool that there's such a collaboration on all of the aspects with this show. And it's not something that you typically hear about. Like a lot of other shows are like, this is how I want it, make it happen. And
Yes.
and from the people that we've talked to who've been a part of this show, it just seems like there's such a conscious effort of collaborating with everyone involved in this that I just think is really cool, and it just enhances the show. And you can tell that it enhances the show. It's just kudos. I really think that's cool.
Yeah, this is actually the first time I've ever had a show that has been this collaborative. Even just interdepartmentally, we send each other all our photographs of what we're thinking, which is great. Like from props to sets to costumes, hair, makeup, we share everything. So it's nice. And we also did the 2 seasons back to back. That was another thing. So it's been 2 years now we've been on this show.
Wow.
So, yeah, we had a week off in between the 2 seasons. Well, my crew did. I didn't. But yeah, so it's...
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So you guys are just like pumping this stuff out season after season.
No rest.
Yeah, no rest. I'm sure Apple, this season was a huge hit as far as the numbers go. I'm sure Apple's going to renew it for another one. Just keep on rolling.
Yeah, I hope we get a break. I don't know.
Hope you get used to that pace.
Oh man.
Yeah, what is it? November 25th will be exactly 2 years.
Wow. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And you were actually on, you worked on season 1 too, right?
No, I did not. I joined in season 2.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was 2 other designers in the first season. One that did the 4 episodes, and the other one did the other 4.
Did you grab their notes from them before they left?
Well, it was. I walked into a warehouse with 39 pallets of stuff.
Wow. Just stacks of things everywhere.
Yeah.
And you just
They shipped everything, including rubber hoses, whatever. They shipped everything, and we had to unpack the pallets first, and then just jump into it.
Wow.
So it was
Honestly, that sounds like a lot of work, but it sounds amazing.
it was like we're pulling out the clothes, going, "What's this?" It's like a radio diode.
Is this an article of clothing or a prop?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It was funny.
That's
Or
awesome.
colanders that were made into hats and that kind of
Oh
thing.
my God, I love it.
Yeah.
Jude's very excited about this interview.
Oh yeah, this is going to be.
I'm sure you're probably already aware, but I stalk you. Lady.
Well, I'm flattered. I haven't posted in the last little while just because we were too busy the last 2 weeks. But yeah, I have 28,000 photographs. So just from that season, and from the other season, about the same.
Jude's like, email them to me.
Yeah, I'm like, can I just come be your free assistant?
Every time we're watching an episode, Jude's just like, I love that coat. Ooh, where did she get that earpiece or something?
Yeah,
We make everything.
Magra's
Even the
coat in the Queen's speech, Magra's coat.
Yes.
I couldn't stop looking at it. I was like, that is the sickest coat.
That actually was an accident because we built this thing out of burlap, and I threw it in the washing machine just to see what would happen, and then all the swirls opened up, and it just became this magnificent thing. And
Oh my God.
I hadn't assigned it, like I had built it for her, but I wasn't sure really, and then I threw the pelt on it because of Baba and his fur, and that was the connection there.
It looked amazing.
Yeah.
That's
It's an
awesome.
accident. I love that accident.
That's hilarious that it's made out of burlap though, because I had like a whole thing about the first season about how much burlap was
Oh
in
yeah.
it.
Everybody
I would
was
have
wearing
never
burlap.
suspected that that's the material that was.
Yeah, it was burlap cut on the cross grain so that when you
Wow.
washed it, it became nice and it was many layers. So, and then the inside we had to line it with cotton because that would have just be cruel.
It's fair.
Yeah.
So have you always been interested in design, or is it more of like an evolution of career that led you to what you're doing today?
Always. I had an aunt who sewed really well, and I was already sewing by hand a lot of things when I was already 4 or 5 years old.
Oh wow.
And I'm also a painter, a fine artist. So I was trying to figure out how can I meld the two. I ended up actually in the opera because I also like to sing, but I wasn't really all that great. I was good, but not good enough. I didn't want to be always in the chorus. Anyway, to stay in that environment, I ended up studying costume. But I've had some runway shows. So eventually then I ended up in film and television because theater doesn't pay much.
Yeah, I bet.
It's hard to survive.
Is there a special piece from the show that you're particularly proud of that you've been a part of?
There's so many. Well, Baba's armor is beautiful. Queen Kane's wedding coat I want it so badly, but I can't have it. Well, it doesn't really fit me, but I don't care. It's just pretty much anything. I mean, Harlan's stuff is really gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
When we start getting into the Pie and Citizens, at one point before COVID, we had 900 background almost every day.
Wow.
Which in each all individual costumes. There's not really, I don't have a favorite child really to say.
Okay.
But it's, yeah.
I vote Baba's armor.
Baba's copper armor is gorgeous.
Well, I thought Ito's armor was pretty badass as well.
Yeah, and I loved Tamakta's return to court outfit.
Yes.
Gorgeous. Have you kept anything, or are you allowed? Do you get to keep anything?
No, and unfortunately that belongs to Apple. So, including my drawings, but they're letting me keep those. So,
Oh, okay.
well, maybe I shouldn't say
nice.
that.
So I was
I'm actually, sorry, just to say, Baba's armor is actually pink. It's not copper.
Really?
It's
Yeah, it's a soft ballet pink, and then we age it, and yeah.
Oh, wow.
So
is it?
it's pink.
God, I just want to sit on your shoulder.
I'm like, so do I need to readjust my TV?
Well, it's Jason's favorite color is pinks and mauves, so we tried to keep it in that vein. There's many different armor plates that we built for him as well, so it was a lot of fun being able to play around with that.
I remember when I was a kid, my mom would try to make me wear a pink shirt. And I'd just be like, Mom, that's stupid. It's girly. Now Jason Momoa is running around in pink armor.
And I noticed a lot of guys on set are wearing pink now too. That's the funny thing.
Nice.
Okay. So I was wondering, so you weren't the costume designer on season 1 of the show. You kind of came in season 2 and 3. So I was wondering how you got involved in the production and what it was like taking over from something that had already kind of been established.
And just to piggyback on that, I was wondering if there was anything that you kept from that time on the show or anything that you tossed.
Well, when you take over a show, you have to obviously continue the story. I was lucky enough that in our season, we ended up going into urban environments. So I could create Travantes from scratch, and I could create pretty much Pensa from scratch, but keeping parameters. Like, for example, the Witchfinders, I had to continue with them because we couldn't just suddenly give them all new uniforms. I did end up modernizing them and changing them as we went along, but and then the general aesthetic of the Payan army, I kept that as well, and morphed it from the original water dam royal guards, and then that made it into more of an army uniform with the chest plates and shortened everything, but more or less the color schemes are all the same for that army. So. And tossing anything, I mean, I didn't really toss anything because their character development, the arc was just so different.
Okay.
And then the sisters now coming head to head about power, basically. So, yeah, it's coming into that was, it's always daunting because you're trying to continue the story and make it so it's seamless. And it was a lot of delving into watching all the previous episodes again and again and again, and then trying to morph it with the new story coming into play. So, and then the 39 pallets of stuff that arrived. Triage.
So did Jonathan Tropper just come to you and hire you for the show, or what? Like, how did you get involved with SEE?
Well, I was working on another show, Most Dangerous Game, and they happened to be in there looking for space because it was supposed to go to another city. And I just happened to say, hey, well, I would love to have an interview with that. And they called me, and I think it was the last interview. And because I had all this, my shop was right there. I packed a buggy full of all the stuff we had and built for all the various shows. And I just wheeled it down the hallway and set up. And then Jonathan showed up the next day and interviewed me again. And then I got the job.
Nice.
So.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, Most Dangerous Game was a Quibi show, right? Starring Hemsworth?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes, it was. And it's funny because they're across the hallway from me right now. They just started up their second season.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah. So
they must be so jealous.
Do you bounce back and forth and like help them out on projects, or are you way too busy doing your stuff?
Well, typically I like to keep my focus on the thing that I'm working on. When you tend to do lots of projects, you're not really focused on one thing. And me personally, I like to know that I'm going to give it then my 150% as opposed to 75 here and 25 there. So it's also, when you have to switch stories, sometimes that's also where mistakes could happen.
Okay.
Especially if they're so very different from one another.
Yeah. So like Ron Swanson said, never half-ass two things, whole ass one thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I fully agree.
So I was wondering, you've mentioned the 39 pallets. So is it more fun or more challenging to work with recycled materials?
Oh, it's so much fun. I'd never done it before. I love it.
Oh, how awesome.
I love it. I mean, I recently posted on Instagram a coat where we jammed knitting needles into the back of it.
I saw it.
Yeah, Harlan's insignia for his lordship is basically the base of a plant. I think it's on this side. It's a base of a plant. Sorry, not a plant, a lamp. The housing, and then on top of that we have telephone wires that we braided and woven into it, and then we have some radio diodes, and then we have some chains that sort of his chain of office, and all sorts of other things hanging off of it. So it's just amazing. And it was funny because Apple actually had emailed me before they released it and said, could you send us a picture of that logo on his coat? And I was like, what? It's not a logo; it's a lamp. So.
So speaking of like the royal family, you're talking about Harlan, Queen Kane, and Magra. What's the creation process like when you're designing those clothes? I immediately go to that one episode where Queen Kane was wearing this like white dress, very flowy with like bright red accents to it. What's the thought process behind making something like that for a blind society?
Well, in this society, we have to be able to either feel it, so in other words, textural, smell it, or hear it. So a lot of the things that happen in the clothing, also we have to appeal to the viewer, because you can't just have a palette of brown clothing kind of thing. It's not very interesting then. But I also, in order to get to the costume, I delve into the psychology of where the character is at that particular moment. And in that case of that white dress, she had just lost her child, and Magra was just about to see her child. There was also a lot of insecurity happening because there was a power struggle between her and her sister. And because if she lost the child, she'd lose probably her kingdom, because then they wouldn't believe her, so there was all of that going on. And then I tried to pull in symbols from other things like TCM in particular, and that the kidney is in traditional Chinese medicine is where you would hide fear and insecurities. And so in order to, I was playing around a little bit because the skirt also looked like a Georgia O'Keeffe painting. So I was trying to meld the two things. And also, I don't know if you noticed, but in the series also I play with colors. Magra's mostly in blues, and Sibith is mostly in reds. And eventually her reds start to change, and they become, because she's got this bloodlust, they get into this sort of dried blood, and she becomes more and more saturated with the color. So that's something I can play with as well for the viewer.
I'm gonna have to go back and check that out now.
Yeah, she's wearing a very Melisandre outfit when she seduces Kofun, when she begins her seduction of Kofun.
Yes.
Do you watch the shows that you create for?
Yes, I do. I also get to see them in dailies every day. They send us what they shot the day before, so that if there are any tweaks, it helps. But the thing is, if we don't shoot in order, so that's helpful for me to see what works and what doesn't. But by that time, it's on camera, so I can't say, can we reshoot that?
So I have one more question about Magra too, and her costume design. She has she always wears these feathered ear cuffs. And in my head canon, because she's an Aira, I believe, is that correct?
Yeah.
God, you say that so well. I still can't say that word.
Sorry, she's an Aira. I would assume that is there to kind of enhance the amount of sound that she can absorb into her ear. Is that accurate, or is there another reasoning for her very stylistic ear cuff?
That is something that is carried over from the first season. So, I mean, I don't know. Typically, feathers signify honor, mostly in any sort of, I want to say, various cultures. That's what it signifies. But also, feathers are silent. But you could also twist that around and say that sound, so the hearing, is carried through the air, which is what feathers fly through. So you can kind of.
My headcanon counts. I like it. Go ahead, Jude.
I was wondering what your favorite material is to work with, and also what your least favorite material is to work with.
Well, I hate polyester.
Fair.
But it has its applications. I don't really have a particular hate for anything. It all depends on its application. I mean, we were using things like burlap, and we were also using in the winter, there's a netting that you use. It's orange, usually bright orange, that they use on streets to prevent snow drifts. So we've used that as fabric as well. So it's really, my favorite, of course, is silks, which I've used on the queens, mostly silks and linens, wool, nice wool. So.
Are you very upset that Silk City burned down?
I found a place in Australia.
Christian Camargo was actually telling us that when they filmed that scene in Silk City, that the set actually did burn down.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I did not know that.
Yeah, he was like, I was supposed to be sitting there with my eyes closed while the camera kind of boomed in, and then the set started to collapse.
He almost died.
So we have an idea of that's why they used some more computer generated flames in season 2, because they were like, we can't do that again.
So I had a question a little bit about the world building, and if you could enlighten us on this, I think it'd be really interesting. which is basically, you know, in a blind society, we theorize that, you know, people who kind of specialize in different fields are very highly prized. So for instance, musicians in a blind society are like the top tier entertainers. And we were introduced to the scent chefs this season and stuff like that. And in my head, I would think that tailors would be highly prized. Like if you had a good tailor, like that was like worth its weight in rope or something like that. I'm just wondering, in the world of SEE, like how does one become like a tailor? Like where do they get their clothes from? How do they harvest their materials? I'm fascinated by the logistics of how this society operates. Can you shed any light on that?
Well, I don't know if you noticed in Pensa, but they have a lot of sheep. So, and there are looms there. So people are looming cloth, weaving cloth. And I think we do have a scene where the Magra and Sibeth are being measured for new dresses once they land. So there are seamstresses, and Harlan, of course, being you know, this black market trader, can get his hands on anything. So he gets cloth from Travantes as well, or anything, jewelry, furs, whatever, wine, drugs, whatever it is that we need. So, but I would assume that yes, you know, being the palace tailor is very, very prized. And then of course you'd have a tanner who's skinning animals, like not only are they using the wool, they're using the skins to make shoes and footwear. But there is in Pensa, you could see all the different craftsmen, and I actually dressed them accordingly in terms of when they were at their shops and stalls. That, you know, the merchants were a little bit more well-to-do than the person, you know, schlepping the cart across the courtyard, that kind of thing. So, but yes, there's definitely a hierarchy, and you'd be more prized if you were a tailor, of course, and especially in Harlan's service.
When the tailors are making measurements, I mean, obviously, like they don't have like the ruled stuff. So how does that work exactly? How would a blind person measure someone?
You probably have a ruler that's rope, and then
I was going to say, you take a piece of string and you run it from your neck to your wrist, and then you tie a knot to that measurement.
Okay.
Cool.
That would be the only thing that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've had numerous discussions about like the costuming and how the different tribes look and stuff. And so my headcanon is that so you probably have one guy making this stuff in your tribe, unless you're like in a kingdom. So everyone in your tribe looks the same, and that's why, because it's one guy and these are the materials that he has. So that's why your whole tribe is wearing the same color, the same materials, and looks the same, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Correct. Yeah.
So
and you notice in
hired?
Yes. When do you want to start?
I will get on a plane right now.
Well, I mean, when you look at the two cities, you can Travantes is, because it's more industrial. I sort of fashion it against 1880s industrial London, where it's kind of gray and sooty, and because they've got the coal mines there as well, and it's just dank and, you know, damp and wet and that kind of thing. Whereas Pensa is more, it's agricultural, so you've got more natural. You dye things with beets and you know, indigo pods, as opposed to not really caring about what color it becomes, because it gets all sooty anyway.
Right. Kind of so, I was wondering how the narrative affects the costuming. Like, do you start with a script and then create out from there? Does the costuming ever change the script or where the story leads?
Actually, yeah, both things happen, and especially on this one, Jonathan's so very generous that sometimes I come up with an idea and then he'd actually rewrite it to accommodate it, which is amazing.
That's awesome.
You know, yeah, it's or for example, if we, I mean, we start with a script, of course, and then that's where I was saying, where you have a presentation of what I'm thinking, and then we have a conversation, and that costume meeting usually involves the director, in this case, Jonathan. My assistant who's taking notes, and my boards that I've glued down, either drawn or you know, sort of mood boards, and then we go from there. Because sometimes he has another vision. He's like, no, I see him with a hood and a vest on, and it's like, oh well, I thought it was a long train coat, you know, that kind of thing.
Okay.
So, and things change sometimes, also for safety. If I'm building an army, like for example, the visors that we have on the Travantian army, that was a lot of R&D, because we had such a hard time trying to make an opaque plastic, like a cover, but that the stunt guys could still see through.
Right.
So that became, you know, there were things that were a little bit rewritten or tweaked so that, you know, like for example, the border guards in Travantes, they had like a soft cap on with a visor that Ren also had. And she calls it her nose hat. The covers like just and that also, we had many versions of it, which I will post eventually. I'm going to post the different versions that we had, the R&D we did for that. And again, they have to be, we have to be allow the actor to see, but it has to look like they don't need their eyes. So
Right.
there's, you know.
Oh, I had no idea that you could actually, the stunt people could actually see through those.
Yeah.
Wow. You guys did a fantastic job of hiding that.
Thank you. Some of it was, sometimes it was helped a little bit with CGI, but yeah, you could actually see through them.
Oh, wow. That's
and
awesome.
Also for all the background standing there, right? They have to be able to walk and not run into things.
Yeah. That's cool.
So, yeah.
So, speaking of working with Jonathan on the show and stuff, there's a clear Japanese inspiration in season 2, and I was wondering where that stemmed from. Was that more of a Jason Momoa thing? Was Jonathan kind of campaigning for that, or was that something that you came up with?
Well, it's odd because I know Jonathan has another series named Warrior, which has to do with you know, Chinatown, and so it's an Asian influence, and which he very much likes. Jason also loves anything Japanese, and oddly enough, I collect kimono, so I have 35 of them, and I also love Japanese.
Oh my gosh!
And I didn't know this when I was hired, but it just happened to work out that way. And when Jason said, you know, I really maybe would like, you know, thinking maybe samurai, and I was like, really? Okay.
That's awesome.
Okay, let's do it. You know. So, yeah, it was such a fluke, I want to say, because I had no idea. I love the aesthetic of Japanese, the lines, the cleanliness of it all, and yet it is so layered and rich looking, and whether that's with color or, you know, actual items or letters or whatever, you know, whatever it is. Wait till season 3.
I'm so excited. I love kimonos too. I have 3. Do you want to be best friends?
Can you fill
and I've got fireman jackets for you too if you want.
Oh my God, lady! I'm gonna show up on your porch.
I could dress you completely up with all the padding and the obi and all that stuff.
I'm never coming
and the
garments.
my fiance got stolen by a costume designer.
Yeah,
it happened.
We're just gonna see her in season 3 walking around the background,
tail as old as in my big red glasses.
actually, in Cervantes, we had. There was a guy, you mentioned him even, he was he was selling prostitutes' wares.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, there was this
Look at these beauties.
I know. The one of them, and it's too bad they didn't actually linger on them a little bit, because there was one that we created in ancient Rome, they have these really elaborate hairdos.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we created one of these as a wig made out of Brillo pad. And it had, and there was this bright orange fur and Japanese geta, which are the shoes that have, you know, the wooden, so it's all over the place.
Oh my gosh.
Can you tell us how a pink piece of samurai armor came to Penn State and spent 500 years there waiting for Baba Voss to show up and put it on?
I can.
Oh,
that's the thing.
Excellent.
And that's actually, in this particular instance, this is how Jonathan ends up writing to make that work. So this is like a perfect instance. The premise of that was that Harlan had an armory, and he had all sorts of things in there. And this happened to be a piece that he also had in his armory that Baba finds and then puts on. And then there's a scene where he feels it, and he sees, or not sees it, but he feels that it's there. And then he decides that's going to be his.
So I noticed about that armor, the front chest plate has a checkered pattern just real subtly in there. Can you explain where that came from, what the material is made of that would make that happen?
I actually purchased from eBay an antique piece of armor, and I think it was from 16 something.
Oh wow! And
it was just the front half, and it was actually in a dark indigo blue, as is often in ikat fabrics and so on. And they had this checkerboard pattern in there. So, and Jason really liked it as well. So we ended up doing it. And that is actually made with, the actual armor is covered in pink leather. Mm-hmm. So there's thick leather underneath a vegetan, and then it's covered with leather. And then in order to create that pattern, we used wax. So the squares that you see is actual wax on the leather.
Oh, okay. Very
That's
cool.
why it's so subtle. It's a slight sheen difference and a little bit of a tonality difference.
Okay. So I have a question, and it's a little hard hitting, but I'm really curious about this because you put so much effort into the costume design. You know, whether it's like, the fabrics are colored this color because of the scent that they carry or this or that. Do you feel like those choices that you make and that you work on are presented for the viewer enough for us to get that message across? Do you feel like there's a little bit of a roadblock for viewers that aren't quite getting the full picture because it's not really like presented in the show enough? How I don't know how else to present that, but how do you feel about that?
Well, I know that one of our issues in season 1 was we were like, why are people wearing color in a blind society? And then we saw an interview with Trish Somerville, who said that like, oh, well, they batch dye these clothes in scents, like, so lavender would turn it purple and stuff like that.
Like bug repellent.
Yeah. And like, we were like, oh, that makes perfect sense. We wish that they had explained it in the show. So like, I think what Alex was talking about was when we see all these like wonderful elaborate costumes you guys make, but they're not really kind of explained to the audience. So it gets to us and we're just like, why are they wearing red? You know?
I think they've done a really good job this season of like, especially with the sound of saying like, oh, these soldiers wear this and it sounds like this. So if it sounds like that, kill it, you know? So not so much with the color necessarily, but I think it's starting to come across that there's a method to the madness of why everything looks the way that it does. It just happens to, it actually has another function.
Yeah, and like Christian Camargo even said, like the ear piercings were a mark of rank. So like when they feel it, you know, they can figure that out. I was wondering about the ritual scarring though. Like, so like we know that Kofun has like these like ritual scars on his cheeks. What are the purposes of those and what do they communicate?
I mean, I wasn't there for the first initial concept of the scarring, but what I've noticed is that whenever there's anyone passed away or dead on the floor, depending on, you know, either where the scars are or it can identify tribes as well. Like you can tell if this dead man is a Travantian or a Payan.
Okay.
So, and then what type of Travantian or Payan is he, or what is his name? So I think that's what it's for.
Yeah, we kind of headcanoned that last season. We were like, I think that's supposed to tell people like who they are if they touch their face and stuff like that. So it makes sense. That tracks.
Correct
like
me.
Hoon has different. Sorry.
No, please. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I swear that the royal bells look different this season than they did last season. No,
they're
the
identical.
Same? Okay.
Yeah, those are shotgun casings, by the way.
Shotgun
I
casings?
love that. I really was wondering what those are made out of. I fashioned my own because I'm the queen of Las Vegas.
The Veganites.
Yeah, they're shotgun casings, and they have tiny little. Often in belly dancing wear, they have these minuscule little bells, and those are sort of, you know, wound with wire onto them.
So we actually asked Christian this question, which was, what's stopping people from just making their own bells and pretending to be royalty like Jude here is doing?
How dare you?
like are bells hard to manufacture in the sea world, or I'm just wondering what the logic behind that is.
Well, I mean, they have you know, blacksmiths, and I don't think it'd be a hard thing to do. I mean, they're building swords and they're building other metal objects. Witchfinders have, you know, things on their plates. We use buckles. It wouldn't be difficult to manufacture them. I'm thinking, if anyone would ever use them, other than the queens, they'd be beheaded in an instant.
Treason.
So maybe that kind of, exactly. That kind of fear would, you know, make you not make them.
If there's somebody out there who can mimic Sylvia Hoax's voice and wear the bells, they're on track for something.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's funny. So my last question for you, I'm sure Jude has a million more, but for me, which costume was the most technically challenging to design for seasons 2?
Technically, I mean, I don't think that any of them were difficult to design. I think it was how to design things. Like, for example, the army, to hide their eyes, because we're supposed to understand that they don't need them to fight with, yet making them so that the people wearing it, the actors and the background wearing it, can actually see through it. So that was very difficult. And the other thing was just generally trying to keep people warm in the minus 40 degrees Celsius weather that we have in the winter, because the initial shot of when they all land in Pensa, we had minus 40 degrees Celsius those days. Wow. It was an entire week of that. And we had 900 people we had to keep
Aw.
warm. So, and trying to hide all that too without it looking like everyone's like a Michelin man.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest challenge actually, is how to, or for example, how to keep someone warm if they're wet, that kind of thing. So those are the things that I find difficult to design.
Is moving into the next season, is the season going to change to a warmer climate? Is that going to be something you don't have to worry about this time around?
I mean, it's a continuation of, the story continues. So we just use the climates we have.
Okay.
So there's sort of a lot of shows, whenever there's, for example, I don't know, a rainstorm or something, or a big snowstorm, they don't shoot, and they'll shoot something else that's maybe inside. We don't have weather cover ever. We never had it. So we just have to deal with what's there. So if everyone's going to get soaked, they're all going to get soaked, or if they're frozen, they're frozen.
It's just part of the story.
It's tough.
That's actually pretty cool though.
So,
The only time we stopped shooting is if there was lightning.
Oh, wow. Oh,
or if the set's on fire.
No, they kept going with that one. They were like, sorry, Christian, we're good. Keep going.
So you mentioned earlier that your table reads have now gone to Zoom meetings. I was wondering how COVID has changed and affected, and like what challenges you faced with like fittings and creating and having to get things out on time. Because I know you didn't take a break for COVID.
Yeah. Well, no, we did take a break.
Oh, you did?
It was mandatory. Yeah, everybody shut down for whatever it was. In Toronto, I think it was 6 months. We all had to stay inside. I think I went back to work. Was it 6.5 months or 7 months later? I was probably the first one in. Well, we set up super rigorous testing, and actually, from what I've heard from other shows that I'm working with, as you see, this band is part of our daily check-ins. And if you're on set, we had, we get tested 3 times a week.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's. With fittings, for example, everything has to be with an N95 mask. You sanitize, then you touch, because unfortunately my job I can't do unless I touch the person, because I have to adjust the clothing. The good thing about it is brought the background numbers down, because we were only allowed to have so many people on set at one time in front of the camera. That included the stunts, the background, and the actors. It also took away the last minute fitting things, which I love. So there were no more last minute fittings. There was no flying someone in the morning of and then putting them on camera 2 hours later, which happened a couple of times because of scheduling conflicts with them, right? So it's that all of that is now thought out. And then we had also, for example, we had in Canada, we had 2 weeks quarantine. So they had to really think about who, what, when they're going to bring them all in, because they needed the 2-week window to have them, sit out their quarantine, and then they could work. So that's how that changed a lot. Yeah. And and then, I mean, for example, for costume itself, the army, the Travantian army and the Payan army, I created sort of mouth wraps with grills on them to hide the masks while they're on set.
Oh, nice.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Like that.
So that was something. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's also warmer.
Yeah, for sure. I always thought it was interesting how logistically in the world itself, if you're not using your eyesight, it would make so much sense to cover your entire face, because it's all vulnerable, and if you get hit in the face, it's going to hurt a lot. So I always thought that was really cool that in the army, in the Payan army or the Travanti army, they literally have whole helmets that cover everything. Like, it makes so much sense. And now that I know that they can actually still see through that stuff, I'm nerding out about that still.
That's really cool.
That's really freaking cool.
I should have brought one to show you. I could have held a flashlight behind it. Essentially, where the eyes are, because they're coated in a paint inside. And that was also another big thing, because we had to make it so that it wasn't shiny or reflective or lighter here, so that you could see that there's like an eye socket, so that you could see. But yeah, this part of the eyes is lighter paint, so that you can actually see. I mean, it's not like you could read a newspaper through it, but you can certainly see where you're going.
Yeah.
Without falling off a cliff.
So one of the things I was wondering is that, like, in a blind society, obviously, like, nudity isn't a thing, because obviously you can't see. So you think that in this world you see a lot more skin than you normally do. So I was just wondering, like, obviously in the winter time, people are going to be layering on clothing to try to keep warm and stuff like that. But we've noticed that Apple TV shows seem to have a very large lack of nudity. So, I'm just wondering, like, was it a real conscious decision to be like, okay, we're not going to show anything in the show, or was it kind of a mandate from Apple?
a little bit of both, but there's so many ways around it because actual sensuality is not necessarily seeing the entire body naked, it's implying it. There's one particular scene where Harlan is in bed after the wedding.
Yes.
And initially it was, I think it was scripted as nude. He was lying nude. But then Tom and I in the fitting, we were kind of playing around. I gave him this sort of long nightshirt and it had a little V cut down to here. And he said, what do you think if we just made it lower? And he's like, okay. So I just took the scissors and I kept cutting lower and lower. And then he's like, hey, stop there. And just having that whole shirt open, it was just as sensual, but you weren't actually seeing anything. So, and then that kind of a thing is nicer to play with in terms for costuming for me than, just having someone there. So it makes you think outside the box.
Yeah, we often compare this show to Game of Thrones, and we talk about that the similarities all the time, and the nudity in Game of Thrones was like absurd.
Very in your face.
Was absurd as far as I'm concerned. So I'm actually really happy that Apple TV and this show that we're watching now, just kind of like it's way more subtle. I think that's a very important thing to do. I really appreciate that. So thank you guys for doing that.
Yeah, my 7-year-old can walk through the room while I have it on and I don't have to worry.
Okay. Well, even the seduction, Kofun's seduction, that's a kimono shape right there, actually. I don't know if you noticed it, but the back of it is, and anyhow, but she takes it off and you see her naked back as she gets into bed with him, and that is I find so much more sensual than just someone going strap,
yeah,
climbing in. So it's
we agree.
Fun to play with it that way too. So
I just have one more. As I said before, I am stalking you, and I've been seeing all of the pictures that you've been posting of like I'm obsessed with the Travantian armies, everything, but especially like their footwear and everything that you're doing to like, just they're so unique with like little things added to it that are like sound, so you can tell if it's a soldier approaching you and stuff. Can you just put me inside your mind and tell me like, just walk me through like the process of like creating the footwear that you're doing, because it's just so interesting to me.
Well, it was that actually, maybe that was the hardest thing to come up with. It was how to indicate the armies approaching, or which army is it, without them saying their names, or and they can't have bells, they can't hold anything else because they've already got their their weapons in their hands. And then I'm a history nerd, big time. I mean, so I was kind of going in my through my mind, wondering, so how did the ancient armies do it? And because Travantes is a little bit of I want to say a Romanesque society, like not Romanesque, but of ancient Rome society, structured that way. I kept thinking hobnail boots. The people were scared of the army because they could hear them for miles coming as they were marching. Why? Because their boots would make noise. So then I started focusing on the footwear, and I tried everything. I couldn't put a bell on it, but I tried shells. I tried to build little clackers. And then I was walking by a music store, which we have here in Toronto, and some weird reason I looked at the tambourines in the window, and I went in and I said, "You sell those separately?" And he said, "Yeah, we have bags." So he gave me like a bag of them. And I took them back to the shop, and and then I was trying to figure out, how can I make these make noise and still attach them to the shoe? And then I started doing more research, and I came up with the spurs, because in ancient Rome they used bougainvillea thorns originally to ride horses. And then that also, you found that in the Middle East, in medieval Arabian, like for riding as well, it was a metal spur. And then that evolved. And then I took that shape and stuck the tambourine shells on it. And because they kept falling off, we had to use piercing bars to keep them through the rubber, and we created them out of rubber so that when they would walk, they would shake, basically.
Okay.
So it's like shaking a tambourine.
And I think it's the same shoe that you're talking about, it kind of looks like it's a weapon on the back of it. Is that intentional? Can that be used as a weapon if you're like...
Exactly.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I knew it.
and then that's on their right foot. And the Payan army had it on their left foot, and they had a little tube with ball bearings in it, so it made a different sound when they would step.
Oh, that is really cool. Yeah, we were talking about like when the Payan army is approaching for the meeting with the Travantes, and how they're carrying their banner, and it's all made of, and they're like, oh, that's them approaching, and you can hear it. Because at first, as soon as they said that, we were all like, how the hell do you,
Yeah. The thing about loving this show so much is we ask so many questions during the episode. We're like, how do they know this? What's logistically, how does this work? Because we want to be able to dive deeper into the show. And that's one of the great things about being able to talk with you and Jonathan and Christian is we get that inside look, and it really flushes out the world a lot for us, which is awesome. I was actually thinking when you were talking about the different armies, I'm like, the first thing my head goes to is like Revolutionary War, where they had the drummers in the back of the army, like keeping the beat. If each army had a different type of drum that made a different sound and somebody was just in the background just freaking going at it, that would be kind of cool too.
So it's a similar premise.
Yeah, I know one of the things about Baba Voss is like he's very much of the earth. He's very like wilderness man. So he gets dressed a lot in like animal furs and, things of that nature. And in this season, we kind of saw some carryover from season 1 where like he's draped in like a bearskin cloak for most of the time. And he's wielding a bunch of antlers and stuff like that. And I was just wondering in episode 2 of season 1, we see him kill a bear. And is that bear cloak the same bear that he killed in that episode? Or is that something he had lying around?
No, not lying around at all. Because I also needed triples of that bear, right? I have actually a great anecdote about that bear skin. It's a golden bear. No, it's not the same one that he killed, but he was in the woods for a long time before he arrived in Pensa, right? So he had to have had some food. So that's where that came from. Quickly, the anecdote about the golden bear is they're hard to find. Black bears are much more common. Anyway, we had to have a double for his stunt, and so during COVID, a lot of hairdressing salons were shut down. And my hairdresser had extensions. So because the bear that I had very short hair and Jason's bear had long hair, we actually put extensions on the bear.
Get out.
We put extensions on the bear.
The lengths you go through for continuity.
I do have one more that kind of came up as we were talking. So you talked about how in Pensa they have a lot of sheep and they're using a lot of that material. And I've noticed that this season with the like pashminas or whatever that cloaks, are made cloaks. Thank you. Sorry. Yeah. Am I fired? But yeah, I've really just enjoyed the look of that, like the use of that material through this season. But I've noticed that they change in color a little bit. Can you like kind of explain like what are they using and why the change? Because I'm sure it's not just the color, it's like the scent or something specific like that.
Well, I mean, for example, Ado's pelt that he has, I was trying to make it look like monkey fur.
Okay.
It used to be a thing in the 1920s. People would wear monkey fur, but it's not. It's Icelandic sheep, and it was just a luxurious black color that it's naturally those colors. We didn't dye any of them except the golden bear extensions is the only time we touched them.
Okay.
I tried to keep them as natural as possible, with the exception of the prostitute in Cervantes who had a bright orange one on.
Okay.
Because you can if you dye things in spices or whatever, you can get a smell from it, and that would attract customers, I guess.
Okay. There's one that Queen Cane wears, and then another one, I don't know if it's the same one or another one that Magra wears, but it almost looks like a pink.
It's like a natural auburn orange.
Really?
Redhead.
God, it's so pretty.
I
want one of those sheep.
I was going to ask about that same jacket because that was very striking. It was like a black jacket with a bright, like reddish collar. Is that the one you're talking about?
No.
No? Oh, okay.
When Magra gives her speech, she's wearing that awesome burlap coat with the pelt over her shoulders. Yeah. And then there's when I forget what episode it is, but Queen Cane is wearing like the mosquito netting dress, and she has a very similar pelt.
Yeah, that's a Mongolian sheep.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
And actually Magra's is the same color. It's just hers is lighter, and Queen Cane's was dark.
Okay.
So
yeah, they look very
different
similar.
Redhead. Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious about Queen Cane's head in most of the episodes. In this season, she was wearing kind of like these caps that kind of like, because she has short hair, they kind of hang down around like the back of her head and stuff like that. And in season 1, she was even wearing crowns. So I was just wondering, like in a blind society, what's the purpose of crowns, and what was the thinking behind her headpieces this season?
Well, when she first got into Pensa, she was still battling with a head wound from the silk farm.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one where she has her new dress that's being made for her, and I think at one point we see it. Maybe, I think unless that got cut out now, I can't remember. But that was the premise behind it. So it was sort of a bandage idea, and then all the crowns that we built for her, of which she must have about. I think we must have built over 60 crowns.
Wow.
Just to figure out what worked best with costumes. They also all have a noise.
Mm-hmm.
When she'd shake her head, it would make noise. So that added to the queenly thing.
I know Sylvia wears those, it's like a chainmail head dress.
I love those.
Which are
it's like a veil.
Yeah, it's very cool. Very interesting. Very unique. I've never seen anything like that before. Was that inspired by something in the real world, or was that something very unique to you guys?
Yeah, it was inspired a little bit by actually a nun's headgear. Weirdly enough.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because she professed to be sort of the all-knowing, the one who communicates with God a lot.
Oh yeah. we all admire her praying.
She's very devout.
So I figured we kind of played around with that with different shapes, and then that's the one that kind of appealed to her, and also allowed her to grow her hair out as well as the story progresses. Right?
Okay.
So
without getting into spoilers, we know you've been working on season 3 right now. You got about 2 weeks left of shooting. Is there something that you can tell us that you're really looking forward to having the audience check out? Is there something that you've been working on that's you're really excited to see on screen?
There's so much. I can't even say it because there's so much, and there's a lot of new stuff too. So, and there's new characters. So, but I can't really elaborate too much on it. So,
have you gotten through all 39 palettes, or are you still making your way through them?
We created a 39 more easily. I have 4 warehouses of stuff.
Oh my goodness.
And we have 2 costume shops, and so we build everything from the footwear to the jewelry to
amazing.
Every garment. We dye everything. It's a full-blown factory, I want to say. And then we have, of course, where we have all the background stuff, and then we have another building that just has the army stuff. So yeah, it's big.
So when sorry, no, go ahead.
No, that's it.
Okay. So when you're dyeing things, like we talked about how you're dyeing them for scent and for bug repellent, does it actually work, or is it just like headcanon? Pretend we're doing eucalyptus, or are you actually using like those materials and that's how it turns out?
The dyer I have, she's a master dyer, and I actually scooped her up from the National Ballet. So I'm lucky me. Yeah, and she does use natural dyes with this stuff, but unfortunately, because of the quantity that we do, we just couldn't control if we had to dye, because we always have to make multiples of everything. So we need 6 shirts that are the same. It's hard to control that when it's completely natural. And the other thing is it's hard to set. Like the color will eventually come out, or fade or change. So if you're shooting, we were block shooting 8 episodes, and sometimes we were doing within one day we'd be shooting 4 different episodes. And we can't lose the color in that, or so that's the only reason why we didn't do it that way.
So you don't have a bunch of shirts that all smell like lavender.
No, but the compass warriors, because of the compass rose, I did actually rub some rose oil into them. So.
Oh, speaking of the compass, there was an Instagram post that you did that showed a piece of compass armor that had like a really cool, almost like Nordic design on the front. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
It's Icelandic, which was interesting because when Hera came in, who's Icelandic, who came in for her first fitting, she saw my mood board. She's like, "That's a Veggvisir," and I'm like, "Yes, it is." And it's like a navigation sign symbol, and eventually it morphed into what looked like a compass rose, because there's like a flower, but it has points of a compass on it. And the legend has it that all the sailors, before they really had, other than moonstones and navigation that way, they would tattoo a compass rose on them so that they would always find their way home safely.
Nice.
No matter where they were.
That's all. That's very fitting for that organization too. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So we know from our talk with Christian Camargo that the actors have kind of like a lot of input into their costumes and stuff like that on the show. And I think it's no secret that one of our favorite characters is Kofun. So I was wondering if you could take us through the thought process on Kofun's outfits.
Oh, let's see. Well, Kofun, I mean, when we see him, he had basically was dressed still in HOE clothing, House of Enlightenment clothing, and which was sort of a mishmash of surplus, because really army clothing never disintegrates. It's also nearly impossible to break down, like age. Like you can't sand it even, because it won't sand, and it doesn't take stains very well. And it's great fabric for that kind of stuff. So he was dressed in sort of a mishmash of that. And then he lands in Pensa, the wedding, etc. And then eventually he gets clothing, but because, he's then getting clothing from the local town, I want to say, which then becomes wool, that are sort of look like they're dyed in like natural vegetable dyes. And slowly I'm morphing him into, he's trying to become a warrior. He's trying to also grow up. He's eventually he finds out he's going to be possibly king someday. So I start to morph him into a young man as opposed to the young son. So that's sort of where that went.
We are really invested in his the growth of that character.
His storyline.
We really want him to be a man.
we're really fighting for him, man. It's so frustrating sometimes when we watch the decisions that he makes. We're like, no.
Yeah. But what was the thought process on the hair? Because he had like these big long dreads. About midway through the season, he gets a haircut and goes for the top knot. So what was the thought process on that?
I mean, I don't know, because that's a hair department thing, but I'm guessing because his father wears his hair that way.
Yeah.
He would want to emulate his father.
I got the Japanese vibe from that. Like he was trying to be like Baba Voss. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that we get introduced to in this season are all the various hidden tribes, and they all kind of come together at in the season finale. So I was wondering if you could tell us about the design choices to make each tribe kind of more distinct.
Well, I was trying to figure out what could we use for each tribe, that basically they all live in the woods. I want to say they live in nature. They're not different cities. So I was playing around with like the Valiers, or their straw, which in theory is not really strong because you could take them out with a match, but if you want to get rid of them. But we were then weaving chest plates for them and sort of capes. And actually, again, Japanese fishermen would wear these straw capes, and would protect them from rain, and is actually warm as well. But I also found this in Turkish fields, like I said, in various different tribes. And so what I started to do is research, the pagan tribes that we have in Bulgaria and that sort of thing. And I would pull from those different ideas and morph. There was one, we have what I call the chimera, and it was, I believe it was a moose head with peacock feathers or some sort of feathers on top.
Peacock feathers. Knew it.
Maybe not peacock, but it was some sort of, I'm trying to remember now exactly because it was a while ago. But yeah, so there was another one where we morphed animals together because those were hunters, let's say. And then, so we had the tree people, and we had anyway, there were 4 different tribes. And then there was Bow Lion that showed up as well.
Yeah.
So I actually have a whole thing in my fashion report for the season finale about the hidden tribes, and I just wanted to see if it lines up with your what you've created for them. So I have the Valier in fringe layers. Close. Yeah. Okay. The Salvin in spiked fur headdresses.
Yep.
Okay. The Yellis in camouflage.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna get a pass on that. And the rain in leather and tree bark.
Yes. And
I'm amazing at this.
Yeah, that's again. These are all natural things you find in the woods.
Yeah.
So that's something readily available. One of the chest plates, I believe it was for the Rayen, was we had thread spools. Those little thread spools, and we sort of strung them together to create a chest plate for that. Yeah. So
I love how you're using like weird things and creating like things, new things out of it. Like how you're using like wires and stuff and creating like something symbolic on Lord Harlan's outfits, and just using out of the box materials. I just think is really cool. It's really interesting that you can make something new out of that.
And you need to go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying in the Travantine market, and this is the one thing that I was kind of a little sad about because we didn't actually get to see any of them. We had a doll salesman, and he had a vest on that had body parts of dolls because they're plastic; they don't disintegrate. And we had the wine salesman who had an entire long coat of corks.
Oh my gosh!
We could make one of those.
Yeah, we could make. We've got our jar of corks behind Jude over there. We could probably make something out of that.
Where do you think the corks came from for that coat?
Yeah.
Jude
Atta
supplied
girl.
them.
Oh my God, we're so going to be besties. I'll bring wine. Just please let me in.
Actually, the mandate costume shop was, okay, everybody start drinking wine because I need the corks.
You would fit
What a
right
tough
in.
job. Yeah.
That's awesome.
You need to do us a favor when season 4 comes around. You need to make a cloak out of peacock feathers and horse manure, just for our compatriot Matt Vader here.
Yeah,
because that's his scent and texture of choice for being in. That's how we know Matt Vader is around. It's like horse manure and peacock feathers.
We have so much fun talking about this show. It's hilarious.
One more question real quick. So in this society, we know that ropes play a big role, just in terms of like communication with knots, identification, stuff like that. So you would think that all these cities and tribes and stuff like that have a way of creating rope. Can you fill us in on kind of like the background behind that and like how it works in this world?
Unfortunately, I don't know how they would create rope, but I used rope in a lot of our clothing. We wove cloaks out of rope, like for example, sail rope that doesn't disintegrate because it's polyester or plastic. Mm-hmm. But in terms of that, a lot of that rope is actually their leather strips, their leather thonging that they knot.
Oh, okay.
So so they're actually strips of leather, a lot of it. Like for example, the stenographers, right? I think they have yellow rope.
Yep.
And I think the premise on that, I don't know because that's a prop thing or a set thing, but I'm guessing that premise is that's dipped in turmeric and that has a specific scent, and then that becomes an official document.
Oh, we were wondering about that.
So cool.
That's so awesome. I love that stuff.
Yeah, so that would be the official books, right, as opposed to the unofficial books.
Okay.
All right, cool. Kadish, are you good?
Yeah, that's pretty much all I had.
Cool. Judy, are you good?
I'm out. Yeah.
All right, cool. So we have something we have something very special in store. We know Jude does the fashion reports for every single episode of this show, and Natalie, you have a fashion report for us.
I do.
So go ahead and take it away.
Okay. Do you want shanked or spanked?
Ladies' choice.
That's up to Jude.
Oh no, this is yours. Make it your own. I'll take a spanking or a shanking, whatever.
All right, let's hope I don't trip over my words here. All right. Hi, this is Natalie Bronfman, the costume designer on SEE, coming to you with a salty nerd fashion report. Because the first thing you think of when it comes to fashion is, of course, 4 nerds in their basement discussing movies. First up is Matt Vader, the barbarian space Viking himself, who is resplendent in his flare-filled backwards ball cap and form-fitting Spanx under his workout clothes. But don't count out this fashion faux pas. His magnificent beard more than makes up for it. Speaking of bears, now we have Alex, whose beard game is weak and should get him spanked by the Payan royalty. But all the ladies love Alex despite his facial hair failures. I mean, who wouldn't love a man who likes to watch sequels before the original? And then we have Kadish, whose entire sense of fashion is based on what does not itch. Normally, I'd comment on his entire ensemble, but it's hard to do that with someone who hardly ever wears trousers.
That's fair.
It's true, yeah.
And finally, we have Juju, the fiery redhead and ambassador of estrogen herself. I mean, what can I say about this beauty? She knows what's what and adds much needed class to this sausage fest of a podcast. Well, that was your Salty Nerd Fashion Report this week. This is Natalie Bronfman, here to remind you that you're still a vision even though no one can see you. Until next, chat.
That was amazing. Thank you so much, Natalie.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Natalie, thank you so much for coming on. I've been looking so forward to this for a long time. So thank you so much.
And before we sign off,
pleasure.
Natalie, where can people find you and your wonderful photos on Instagram? Go ahead and shout out your social medias.
I'm at Bronfman Nata on Instagram, and I don't really post anywhere else, so find me there.
Okay, cool. Thank you guys so much.
I'm gonna keep stalking.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then we'll talk about season 3.
Okay. Yes. We will be there for sure. This is definitely as a podcast. we have grown with this show. Like we started off with season 1. That was a rough start
We
for
grew
us.
up much like Kofun.
Yes, we bumbled our way into becoming
We're
a good
almost
podcast.
a man.
But we're really looking forward to the further seasons of this show, and thank you so much. And please express our thanks to the rest of your crew and the production offices and stuff like that. We are so grateful that you guys check out our stuff, and we know we take shots at the show and we have fun with it. And you guys all have a wonderful thick skin and a sense of humor, and we really appreciate that. So thank you guys so much.
Well, thank you for having me. And I have an amazing team. I have 57 people on staff. I've never had a team so big, and I have the most brilliant artisans ever. So that's what makes this stuff so wonderful.
Nice. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Salty Nerd Podcast. Please stay tuned. We have a lot more interviews coming with production of the our favorite TV show, See. So hit the subscribe button, hit the like, share this video with your friends, and stay tuned for what's next. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. Jude, where can they find you on the socials?
You can find me at I am Jude Juju on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok.
And Matthew Kadish.
You can find me at Matthew Kadish, Kadish on Twitter, and kadishbooks.com takes you to my Amazon page.
And I'm your host, The Salty Nerd. You can catch me on our Discord app. Go to saltynerddiscord.com, where we have a dedicated chat just for this show. So come join us and chat about See. And as always, stay salty, my friends.